Hello, and welcome back, guys, gals, and non-binary pals, to another reading of A Starstruck Legacy. This will be Chapter 6, It All Goes Out with a Bang. Here's the summary. The rest of the sports festival. Izuku and Ochako made their way to the waiting rooms for their respective matches. Ochako was certain her friend would beat Setsuna with his giant robot. How couldn't he? It's a giant robot. As for her match against Shoto, "You're worried about your match too?" Izuku asked. Ochako let out a mirthless laugh. "How could I not be? I mean, you saw what he did to Shoji, and now I gotta fight that." "I think you can do it," Izuku said without a hint of uncertainty. "I mean, I have a plan, but you know what they say. No plan survives contact with the enemy." "Yeah, but let's not forget that you're from Gen Ed. Strategically speaking, there's a good chance he'll underestimate you, at least on some level." "That's something, but not really a strategy I can rely on." "Maybe not, but I have a bunch of other ideas to counter his quirk. Like, what if—" "Hold it right there, Midoriya," Ochako interrupted. "I appreciate what you've done for me so far, truly I do, but I want to do this part on my own. You know, I gotta win for me and my parents." "Your parents?" "Yeah, I want to support them in any way I can. That's the real reason I became a hero." "That's good," Izuku smiled. "It's always good to look out for your parents." Ochako didn't smile back, however. Her mind seemed to be lost in thought. "Yeah, that's why this is so important to me. My family runs a construction company, but we don't get much work. We're always low on money, which is why I was so surprised that my parents bought me an apartment close to UA and—" Ochako suddenly shut her mouth as she realized she was rambling. Sorry, I don't mean to vent." "I don't mind," Izuku responded earnestly. "Sometimes it's good to talk to people about this kind of stuff. Please, continue." "Okay." Ochako got back on topic. "They got me an apartment close to UA, which would have been fine if I got into the hero course, but—" "You didn't," Izuku finished. "So you want to get in now so your parents' investment won't go down the drain." "Yeah," Ochako nodded solemnly. I don't want to be a burden." Izuku gave Ochako a look of familiarity. "I get it. Sometimes I feel like a burden on my mom too. Sometimes I wish I could do more, that I didn't have to make her worry so much." He sighed. "I know our situations aren't exactly the same, but my mom always assures me that everything she does for me. So I don't think it matters to your parents that you're living in an apartment, or if you're not in the hero course yet. As long as you're out there attending your dream school, I don't think they could be any happier." Izuku was caught off guard as Ochako pulled him into a tight hug. "Thanks, Midoriya. That really means a lot to me." Izuku blushed at this sudden close contact. It's nothing, Raka. My mom says that kind of stuff to me all the time." Ochako giggled as she broke the hug. "You can call me Ochako if you want. I think you've done enough for me." Ochako didn't think it was possible for Izuku to get any redder, but lo and behold, "You can call me Izuku!" With that, he dashed off to the waiting room to prepare for his match. Ochako couldn't help but grin at her friend's reaction. She hoped she didn't distract him from the upcoming match too much, but still, she couldn't help but admit seeing him get all flustered was kinda cute. "Wait, cute?" Ochako paused as she mentally retraced her footsteps. Sure, she thought Izuku was cute. How could he not be with that messy green hair, radiant emerald eyes, diamond-shaped freckles, and radiant smile? But she could appreciate good looks without having it be platonic. It wasn't like she deeply appreciated Izuku for all she did for her. Okay, she did, but that was just as friends, right? Right? Ochako slapped her hands on her cheek to snap out of it. She would have plenty of time to think about her feelings towards her friend after the sports festival. "You okay there, buddy? You're looking a little red there," Setsuna called out to her opponent. "It's nothing," Izuku said as he wiped the blush off his face. "You both know the rules, so I won't waste your time here," Midnight announced. "Ready? Fight!" When the whip cracked, Setsuna detached her hands and flew them towards Izuku and his mighty mech. Izuku tried to grab them out of the air, but they were slipperier than they looked. When the hands got too close, Izuku braced for impact, expecting to get hit in the face. But to his surprise, the hands ignored his face and started fiddling around with the control panel beneath him. It wasn't long before the mech began flailing around randomly. "Hey, whoa, stop it!" The robot jerked left, jolted right, waved its arms around, and spun around in circles. Izuku tried to wrestle the hands off the controls, but found himself distracted by a disembodied pair of legs kicking him in the head. Setsuna tried to drive the mech out of bounds, but couldn't get a hang of the controls. "How the heck do you steer this thing?" "It took a few days of practice," Izuku said as he tried to pull the hands away, who were making the robot do the worm. Izuku soon gave up on this endeavor and elected to try a new tactic. He grabbed one of Setsuna's legs and used it to push a big red button. Half a dozen explosive items fired out of the robot's shoulders and headed straight for Setsuna. Setsuna split herself into more pieces to dodge the projectiles. Then she floated high above the flailing robot. Nice try, my fellow greenie, but there's no way your ammunition can fire this high. I don't have to. I still have your leg. Izuku took off Setsuna's shoe and began tickling her foot. He noticed her hands loosen from the controls. Stop it! I'm ticklish! Whatever you say! Izuku used the distraction to pull Setsuna's hands off the controls. Then, taking back control of his robots, he used its hands to grab one of her legs and chuck it across the field. Setsuna Tokage's leg is outside the arena! Izuku Midoriya wins! Midnight cheered. Aw man, that was dirty! Setsuna huffed as she reassembled herself. All pretenses of good sportsmanship went out the window as soon as you touched my controls, Izuku stated flatly. Setsuna held up her hands in a mock surrender gesture. Oh, okay, I get it. I won't mess with you support types. To be honest, you should be more worried about Mei than me. Ochako practiced her deep breaths as she made her way to the arena. She had her hands at her side, ready to take away her own gravity at a moment's notice. She knew she only had one shot at this, and she couldn't afford to waste it. Contestants, are you ready? Let's just get this over with, Shoto drawled. What he said, Ochako concurred. Ready? Fight! The moment the whip cracked, Shoto waved his hands and unleashed a huge glacier like he did at his last fight, but Ochako was prepared. At the same time, she removed her gravity and used her boots to get as high as possible. She only missed getting frozen by a hair. Ochako saw Shoto from above. He wasn't looking up, so he must have assumed he froze her. Ochako took this opportunity to jet towards her opponent and pull back her fist to deck him in the face. Unfortunately for her, Shoto realized her presence at the last second and created a wall of ice to block her. Ochako quickly stopped in front of the wall and placed both hands on it. She felt her stomach lurch at the extra weight, but she managed to fight it down. Shoto noticed her pick up his wall and sent another wave of ice her way, but the Gravity Girl slammed the wall onto his ice barrage mid-formation, interrupting the attack, and shattering the wall into dozens of large chunks that floated above the fighters. Ochako could see the hypothermia inch up Shoto's skin. She knew he didn't have it in him for another large-scale attack, so she rushed at him with everything she had. Shoto sent as many small ice spikes as he could to impede her progress, but Ochako managed to use the extra mass from her boots to shatter them into pieces. Now out of options, with Ochako mere inches away from him, Shoto did the only thing he could think of and created an ice barrier around himself to hopefully stall for time and warm himself up. Ochako glared at the ice barrier as she pressed her hands down together and shouted, "Release!" The floating chunks of ice from earlier rained down on Shoto's protective dome. It cracked, but it didn't break. Ochako took a few steps back, got a running start, and drop-kicked straight through the barrier and into Shoto's stomach, knocking the air out of him and sending him to the ground. The last thing Shoto saw before he lost consciousness was Ochako grabbing a stray chunk of ice and slamming it into his head. Shoto Todoroki has been rendered unconscious. Ochako Uraraka wins. Ochako, that was incredible, Izuku exclaimed as Ochako exited the arena. Thanks, the girl huffed, still out of breath from the match. I was mostly running on instinct during that last part. Still, couldn't have done it without your boots. No way! Izuku rapidly shook his head. The boots are only as good as the person who uses them. I can tell they really grew on you. Thanks. I know for certain I'm including them in my hero costume once I get in. You know, after I win this whole thing. Izuku's mood noticeably dampened at that. Right. That. It didn't take long for Ochako to figure out what he was referring to. Yeah, we have to fight each other next round. I just hope they'll let us both in. I don't want to take away this opportunity from you. Forget about me. What about you, Izuku? You worked hard to get here too. I know, but after what you told me before your fight against Todoroki... Ochako placed a hand on Izuku's shoulder and looked him dead in the eyes. Izuku, forget about both our motivations for a second. You deserve this opportunity as much as I do. And in the end, it all comes down to who's the better fighter. So even if they let both of us into the hero course, promise me you won't hold back during our fight. Izuku couldn't help but admire Ochako's determination at that very moment. It was a lot like Katsuki's, but instead of putting him down, she funneled that energy into pulling him up. It was a gesture that made his heart melt. He was passively aware of his budding crush on the girl, but he made a conscious effort to procrastinate on that. I promise. Izuku matched Ochako's determined glare. They glared at each other for a few moments before their shared laughter broke the silence. Well then, Ochako giggled as she made her way back to the 1C stands. When we next meet, 'twill be on the field of battle. She accompanied her medieval-sounding line with a dramatic flourish of an imaginary sword. May the better competitor win, Izuku responded with a similar, over-dramatic tone. Quarterfinals, round 3. Mina Furasa versus Momo Yayorozu. Mina came onto the field looking noticeably disheveled. Not that it mattered, since she yielded the moment the match began, on account of all her support items getting destroyed during her last fight. Quarterfinals, round 4. Ibara Shiozaki versus Nato Monoma. Unlike Monoma's last round, he couldn't get close enough to tag his opponent before Ibara wrapped him up in her vines. Oh well, sucks to suck. Semifinals, round 1. Momo Yayorozu versus Ibara Shiozaki. Momo created a pair of axes to chop away at Ibara's vines, but she quickly found herself overpowered by the sheer number of them. In her panic, she forgot the chemical structure of a flamethrower and ended up getting thrown out of the ring. Semifinals, round 2. Izuku Midoriya versus Ochako Uraraka. No words needed to be shared between the two combatants before their fight. They already knew what was about to go down. Ready? Fight! The first thing Izuku did was shoot a projectile towards his opponent, who removed her gravity and leapt over it. Izuku knew he had to be careful. He only had 2 more shots left. Ochako used her boots to jet towards him, hand outstretched. Izuku went for a right hook, but she vaulted over his large metal arm and landed all 5 fingers on his mech's chest. Izuku didn't panic as he floated off the ground. He instead dug both his scorpion tails into the ground to serve as tethers. He noticed Ochako eye those tethers with conviction. He was sure they would be her next target. And he was right. She springboarded off the robot, landed herself on the ground, and made a mad dash to remove the tails from the ground. What he didn't expect, however, was for one of the tails to remove itself and take a jab at her. She managed to avoid the brunt of the attack, but the sharp metal left a nasty-looking cut on her shoulder. As Ochako instinctively clutched her shoulder with her other arm, Izuku fired his second-to-last projectile right at her feet, knocking her backwards and sending her spinning in circles. Izuku saw his chance. He fired his last projectile to hopefully blast her out of the ring, but to his surprise, she caught the projectile in midair and threw it right back at him. The broken toaster exploded right under the floating mech, severing both its tethers and causing it to float straight up into the air. Izuku was out of options. He had no projectiles or scorpion tails. Worse yet, Ochako reoriented and launched herself in Izuku's direction, preparing to shove him out of bounds. All Izuku had left was himself, but that was all he needed. When Ochako was inches away from his suit, Izuku leapt out of the cockpit, latched onto Ochako's floating body, and wrapped his arm around her neck, trapping her in a chokehold. Ochako flailed around in midair as she tried to loosen Izuku's grip. She activated her boots and the pair flew around wildly, like a bull trying to buck off its rider. But no matter which direction they flew, no matter how tight they turned, the rider refused to yield. Eventually, the boots sent them careening towards the ground. The pair tumbled across the arena before coming to a stop, Izuku's arm still latched around Ochako's neck. It was at this point when Ochako realized there was no way out of this. She could either yield or get strangled unconscious. "I yield," she shouted. Izuku was quick to unhook his arm. He let out a breath as Ochako let one in. "Ochako Uraraka has yielded. Izuku Midoriya is our second finalist," Midnight announced. "Hey, sorry about that," Izuku meekly apologized as he helped her up. "I didn't want to have to do that, but you were really tough." Ochako suddenly brought Izuku into a tight hug, and the crowd cooed. "You dummy. I told you to go all out. I would have been disappointed if you didn't try that." Izuku couldn't help but chuckle. "You would have been disappointed if I didn't strangle you?" Ochako playfully flicked him on the head. "You know what I mean. Just make sure to win for me, okay? Let's say I win for us instead." Ochako went for a fist bump, which Izuku reciprocated. "I say go for it." Final round, Izuku Midoriya versus Ibara Shiozaki. "It's been a long festival, ladies and gentlemen, but now we're down to our 2 finalists," Present Mike shouted. "Who will win, the scrappy underdog made of scrap metal from our support course, or the Christian Crusader from Class 1B? "Lord, please forgive me for the violence that is about to occur," Ibara prayed as she walked up the arena. Izuku took the moment to check up on the condition of his mech. All he had left were his fists, shields, and wheels. Well, he also had his overheating issue, but how was that supposed to help him win against... Oh, Izuku just had the worst idea. "Contestants ready?" At their nod, Midnight cracked her whip. "Let the final battle begin!" Izuku rolled up to Ibara as fast as he could, not caring he was pushing the engine to the point of overheating. Suddenly, a torrent of vines burst from the ground beneath him and tied themselves around his wheel, sending him to the ground. Izuku tried to use his mech's hands to get up, but they were quickly ensnared as well. "Midoriya, are you able to move?" Midnight asked. "Hold up, I still have one more trick up my sleeve." As the vines constricted around the robot, Izuku turned every possible setting as high as he could go. With each switch flipped, each button pressed, each dial turned, he could feel the heat build up more and more around him. Right as the temperature threatened to burn his skin, Izuku slammed his fist on a large button labeled Eject, and shot himself out of the cockpit and towards his opponent. Right as he was launched out, the mighty mech couldn't take the heat anymore and exploded into a raging ball of flames. Flaming chunks of metal rained down on the field and quickly spread to Ibarra's vines. "God, why hast thou forsaken me?" she yelled as the fire spread across her vines, causing her to wildly flail them around in a panic. Izuku ignored the commotion as he charged towards his opponent, his face contorted with a determined rage. He leapt, ducked, and rolled to avoid the vines and falling metal. He was nicked by thorns and he was burned by fire, but he fought through the pain. He was used to it. There was only one goal in his mind at the moment, and nothing in the known universe could stop him at that point. With one last push, he lunged at the distracted Ibarra and tackled her out of bounds, making sure that her body crossed the line first. "Ibarra Shiozaki is out of bounds. Izuku Midoriya wins the sports festival," Midnight cheered, along with the crowd. "It burns! Also, someone call the fire department." "Congratulations, Izuku Midoriya. I'm sure you'll make a fine hero someday." And All Might meant those words. As he hung the first-place medal around the young boy's neck, he couldn't help but admire him for his strength and tenacity. He had been disillusioned with heroics for a while, only getting a teaching job at UA to hopefully find a successor. But watching this boy climb to the top using only his brain in a robot suit, no quirk required, he couldn't help but feel that spark return to him. After all, heroes were supposed to overcome insurmountable odds, and this boy did just that. Who knows, maybe he'd want to have a chat with this boy in the future. "Congratulations, Izuku Midoriya. I'm sure you'll make a fine hero someday." "I gotta admit, I wasn't expecting this outcome." "Of course you weren't," Katsuki yelled at his conscience. "Deku's a quirkless weakling. He must have rigged the game somehow." "Just because I didn't expect it doesn't mean I don't accept it, Kats. And now you gotta accept it too." "Accept what? That he's better than me?" "I'm not saying he is. I'm saying that's what you think. At least subconsciously. I know because I'm your subconscious. You secretly feel threatened by him, and that's why you lashed out at him." "Nope. Shut up, shut up, shut up. He may have won today, but I'm going to surpass him the first chance I get. Then we'll see who's the real number one." That's another thing. You don't always have to be the number one. I'm not even going to dignify that with a response. Of course I blast and do. Sounded like a response to me, Katsuki's conscience muttered. Anyways, you weren't number one in the sports festival, and would you look at that? The world hasn't ended. Can I at least get you to agree with that? Will you leave me alone if I do? I will until school starts back up in 4 days. Fine. Yay, progress. Congratulations, Izuku Midoriya. I'm sure you'll make a fine hero someday. Melissa Shields stared at the screen with hopeful tears in her eyes. She had watched the UA Sports Festival every day for a decade, and this was the first time she'd seen someone win using only support items. It planted an idea in her head. Sure, she was content with making gear to help heroes like her Uncle Might, but if someone like him could beat that many Hero Corps students, who's to say she couldn't take it one step further? Dad, I'm going to Japan. Can it wait until after the iExpo? Okay. She could wait a few months. After all, that just gave her more time to experiment with what kind of weapons she put in her new hero costume. Congratulations, Izuku Midoriya. I'm sure you'll make a fine hero someday. Star watched from her flat-screen TV as the green-haired boy stood on the podium, crying his eyes out. Thankfully, all his support gear seemed to be waterproof, at least what was left of it. As All Might hung the first-place medal around his neck, Star nodded in satisfaction. There was no doubt in her mind that he just earned a place in UA's heroics course. I knew you could do it, kid. And so did I, Jasper shouted out. You owe me $50, Ryan. When did I tell you about gambling on teenagers? Aaron interrupted. And that's the end of Chapter 6 and the end of the sports festival. Oh man, Flapjack, the author, really did manage to write a sports festival really well. Nice and concise. Whenever I tried to write a sports festival, it ended up being a good 50,000 words because I wrote everything too much. Anyways, what this means is Izuku is on his way to starting the, real meat of the story, which is, him getting one for all and New Order, which is the craziest combination. I really love that idea, and it gets even crazier from here on out. Anyways, thank you all so much for listening. I'll see you next time for Chapter 7. Patch out.